In the shadows of our world, where moonlight dares not fully penetrate and ancient secrets pulse through the veins of the night, two vampire clans have waged a silent war for centuries. The Draegor clan, masters of darkness and blood magic, have ruled the northern territories with an iron fist wrapped in velvet gloves. The Vaelor clan, wielders of ancient wisdom and keepers of the old ways, have held dominion over the southern lands with grace and deadly precision. For 300 years, these two houses have existed in a state of cold war, their hatred burning as eternal as their cursed existence. No Draegor has spoken to a Vaelor without venom dripping from their words. No Vaelor has looked upon a Draegor without contempt darkening their immortal eyes. The blood of both clans has soaked the earth in countless skirmishes, each death adding another layer to the foundation of their mutual loathing. But hatred, as powerful as it may be, has never been a match for the one force that can shake even the foundations of eternity itself. Love. Forbidden, dangerous, impossible love. This is the story of Lucien Draegor and Selene Vaelor. This is the story of how two hearts, long thought dead, found the courage to beat again. The Crimson Moon Festival occurred only once every 50 years, a night when all vampire clans gathered under a truce as ancient as the curse that made them. It was held in the neutral territory of Shadowmere, a sprawling Gothic estate that belonged to no clan but served all. On this night, politics were set aside, old grudges temporarily forgotten, and the immortal society celebrated their existence with blood wine, music, and the sort of decadent revelry that only those who have seen centuries pass can truly appreciate. Lucien Draegor had not wanted to attend. At 243 years old, he had seen 3 such festivals, and each had been an exercise in tedious diplomacy and false pleasantries. As the eldest son of Lord Victor Draegor, however, his presence was not optional. His father had made that abundantly clear. "You will attend, you will be civil, and you will remember that every eye in that hall will be watching you," Victor had said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You are not just Lucien tonight. You are a Draegor. You are my heir. Act accordingly." So Lucien had donned his finest attire, a tailored black suit with silver threading that caught the light like spider webs in moonlight. His dark hair swept back to reveal the sharp, aristocratic features that marked him as nobility. He looked every inch the vampire prince he was born to be, even if the role felt like a cage around his chest. The ballroom of Shadowmere was a sight to behold. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the assembled immortals, their combined power making the very air shimmer with supernatural energy. Vampires from every major clan filled the space. The elegant Ashenfords, the fierce Blackthorns, the mysterious Nightshades, and of course, the Draegors and the Vaelors, carefully positioned on opposite sides of the room like opposing armies at a ball. Lucien navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging polite nods and hollow pleasantries. He accepted a glass of blood wine from a passing servant, the crimson liquid swirling in the crystal like liquid rubies. He had just begun to plot his escape to one of the quieter balconies when he saw her. She stood near the far window, silhouetted against the moonlight streaming through the ancient glass. Her gown was the color of midnight, flowing around her like liquid shadow, and her hair fell in waves of silver blonde that seemed to capture and reflect every bit of light in the room. But it was her eyes that captured him. Violet eyes that held depths of emotion he couldn't name, eyes that seemed to see through all the masks and pretenses that filled the room. Lucien knew immediately that she was a Vaelor. He could sense it in the way the other Vaelor clan members orbited around her protectively, in the distinctive grace of her movements, in the particular shade of power that radiated from her like perfume. And yet, he found himself unable to look away. She turned, and their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. In that moment, the noise of the party seemed to fade away. The music became distant. The crowd blurred into insignificance. There was only her, looking at him with an expression that mirrored his own shock and something else. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never met. A sense of inevitability, as if the universe had been conspiring to bring them to this exact moment for all of their immortal lives. Selene Vaelor had lived for 217 years, and in all that time, she had never felt anything quite like the jolt that went through her when she locked eyes with a stranger across the room. She knew who he was, of course. The sharp cheekbones, the midnight dark hair, the way he carried himself with a mixture of authority and carefully controlled restraint. He could only be Lucien Draegor, the heir to the clan her family had been taught to despise since the moment she had been turned. She should have looked away. Every instinct, every lesson, every warning her mother had ever given her screamed that she should turn her back and forget she had ever seen him. But Selene had always been curious, had always questioned the rules that bound her, and something in his gaze called to something in her soul. Before she could second-guess herself, before rational thought could override impulse, she began to move through the crowd toward him. She saw his eyes widen slightly, saw him straighten as if preparing for, what? A confrontation? An introduction? She wasn't sure herself. They met in the center of the ballroom, in a small pocket of space that seemed to form naturally around them, as if even the other guests sensed that something significant was happening. "Selene Vaelor," she said, her voice steady despite the inexplicable racing of her heart. She extended her hand in the formal vampire greeting, palm up, fingers slightly curved. Lucien stared at her hand for a moment, and she could see the war playing out behind his eyes. To refuse the greeting would be a grave insult, especially during the sacred truce of the festival. But to accept it, to touch her, might be seen as betrayal by his own clan. He took her hand. His fingers were cool against her palm, and the moment their skin touched, Selene felt a spark of electricity that had nothing to do with blood magic and everything to do with something far more dangerous. "Lucien Draegor," he replied, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "I'm surprised to meet you." "Because I'm a Vaelor?" she asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Because you're brave enough to approach a Draegor," he corrected, his own mouth curving into the faintest hint of a smile. "Or perhaps foolish enough." "Perhaps both," Selene conceded. "But the festival is a time of truce, is it not? Surely we can have one conversation without starting a war." "One would hope," Lucien said, though his eyes flicked briefly to where his father stood across the room, watching him with an expression that promised consequences. "Though I suspect we're already being watched and judged." "Let them watch," Selene said with a defiance that surprised even herself. "I've grown tired of ancient grudges I don't even fully understand." "Haven't you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications. Lucien studied her for a long moment, and Selene had the distinct impression that he was seeing her, truly seeing her, in a way that no one had in a very long time. "Every single day," he admitted quietly, the confession slipping out before he could stop it. For the next hour, they talked. They talked about everything and nothing, about the tedium of immortality, about the weight of family expectations, about books they had read and places they had traveled. They discovered a shared love of philosophy, a mutual appreciation for human art, and a common frustration with the rigid hierarchies of vampire society. They spoke in low voices, aware of the eyes upon them, but unable to stop. It was as if a dam had broken, and years of loneliness neither had fully acknowledged came flooding out. In each other, they found a kindred spirit, someone who understood the unique isolation of being born into nobility and power but craving something more authentic, more real. When the clock struck midnight and the festival began to wind down, Lucien realized with a start that he had spent the entire evening with Selene, ignoring all other guests, neglecting his duties as his father's heir. And he couldn't bring himself to regret a single moment. "I should go," Selene said reluctantly, glancing toward where her own family was preparing to depart. "My mother will already be furious that I've spent so long speaking with you." "When can I see you again?" The words left Lucien's mouth before he had consciously decided to speak them, reckless and dangerous and absolutely necessary. Selene's eyes widened. "That would be unwise." "I'm aware," Lucien said. "I'm asking anyway." She bit her lip, a gesture so human and endearing that it made his chest ache. "The old cemetery on the border between our territories. 3 nights from now, at midnight. If you truly want to risk it." "I'll be there," Lucien promised. "So will I," Selene whispered, and then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd with a grace that made it seem as though she had never been there at all. Lucien stood alone in the center of the ballroom, his heart pounding with something that felt dangerously close to hope. He had no illusions about the danger of what he was doing. To pursue any relationship with a Vaelor was to court disaster. And yet, as he caught one final glimpse of silver-blonde hair disappearing through the doors, he knew with absolute certainty that he would be at that cemetery in 3 nights. Some risks, he realized, were worth taking. The cemetery sat on neutral ground, a forgotten piece of earth where humans had once buried their dead before the local population dwindled and moved away. Now it was a place of moss-covered headstones and gnarled trees, silent and still except for the occasional rustle of nocturnal creatures going about their business. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting, isolated, abandoned, and technically belonging to neither clan. Lucien arrived early, his nerves making it impossible to wait until the appointed time. He had spent the past 3 nights in a state of constant tension, waiting for his father to confront him about the Crimson Moon Festival, but Victor had said nothing. Perhaps he had been too occupied with other matters, or perhaps he was simply biding his time, waiting to see if Lucien's indiscretion would repeat itself. Either way, Lucien was here now, pacing among the headstones like a restless ghost, questioning his sanity while simultaneously knowing he would do this 1,000 times over for another chance to speak with her. "You came." Lucien spun around to find Selene standing beneath an ancient oak tree, her silver-blonde hair glowing faintly in the moonlight. She wore simple clothing this time, dark pants and a deep blue top that somehow made her look even more beautiful than the elegant gown she had worn at the festival. "Did you think I wouldn't?" he asked, moving toward her with perhaps more eagerness than was dignified. "I hoped you would," she admitted. "But I would have understood if you hadn't. This is dangerous for both of us." "I don't care," Lucien said, and was surprised to find he meant it completely. They sat together on a fallen gravestone, shoulders nearly touching, and talked long into the night. They shared stories from their childhoods, if the early decades of a vampire's life could be called childhood. Selene told him about learning to hunt, about the first time she had tasted blood and how terrifying and exhilarating it had been. Lucien spoke of the crushing expectations placed upon him from the moment he had been turned, how he had never been allowed to simply exist, only to perform the role of heir. "Do you ever wish you could just leave it all behind?" Selene asked at one point, her violet eyes reflecting the stars above them. "Run away to some distant place where no one knows your name or your clan or your history." "Every day," Lucien confessed. "But it's not that simple, is it? We're bound by duty, by loyalty, by the expectations of dead men who started a war we don't even fully understand," Selene finished bitterly. "I've asked my mother a dozen times what started the feud between our clans. Do you know what she tells me? It doesn't matter what started it. It only matters that it continues. As if hatred is some sort of sacred legacy to be preserved." Lucien reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling natural and right. What if it didn't have to continue? What if we could find a way to end it? Selene looked at him with a mixture of longing and sadness. "Do you really think it could be that simple? That 2 people could undo 300 years of bloodshed just by wishing it away?" "No," Lucien admitted. "But perhaps we could be the beginning of something different. Perhaps if we show them that a Draegor and a Vaelor can exist together without violence, it might plant a seed of possibility. Or it might get us both killed," Selene said pragmatically. "There are those in my clan who would see my death as preferable to the shame of consorting with a Draegor. I suspect your clan feels similarly." "They do," Lucien confirmed grimly. "My father would likely disown me at minimum. At worst." He didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what vampire justice looked like. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their situation settling over them like a shroud. And yet, despite the danger, despite the impossibility of it all, neither of them suggested ending their meetings. Instead, they made plans to see each other again, and again, and again. Over the following weeks, the cemetery became their sanctuary. They met every few nights, timing their departures carefully to avoid suspicion, always alert for any sign that they had been followed. They talked about everything: philosophy, history, their hopes and fears and dreams. They challenged each other intellectually, argued passionately about everything from politics to poetry, and discovered that disagreement could be as thrilling as harmony. But it wasn't just conversation that drew them together. There was a physical pull, an attraction that grew stronger with each meeting. It started innocently enough, hands brushing as they walked, sitting closer together as the nights grew colder, the occasional touch that lingered just a moment too long. Then came the night when everything changed. They had been debating the nature of love, whether it was a choice or a compulsion, a strength or a weakness, when Selene suddenly went quiet. Lucien looked over to find her staring at him with an intensity that stole his breath. "What?" he asked softly. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of how you make me feel." She turned to face him fully, and he could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear warring with something stronger. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Lucien Draegor. And that terrifies me more than anything in my 200 years of existence." Lucien's heart, which had been still for so long he had almost forgotten it could do anything else, seemed to stutter back to life in his chest. "Selene." "Tell me I'm alone in this," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll walk away right now. We can go back to being enemies, to living the lives our clans expect of us. Just please, if you don't feel what I feel, tell me now before this goes any further." Lucien reached up and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently brushing away tears he hadn't realized had fallen. "I can't tell you that," he said hoarsely, "because it would be a lie. I've been falling for you since the moment I saw you across that ballroom. Every conversation we have, every moment we spend together, I fall harder. You're the first person in my entire existence who has made me feel truly alive." "Then we're both fools," Selene said with a shaky laugh. "The greatest fools in history," Lucien agreed. And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid that too much intensity would shatter the moment. But then Selene's hands came up to grip his shoulders, and Lucien pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and necessary and absolutely perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily despite having no need for air, Lucien rested his forehead against hers. "We can't go back from this," he murmured. "I don't want to," Selene replied. "It's going to get worse before it gets better. If our clans find out." "Let them find out," Selene said with sudden fierce determination. "I'm tired of living in fear. I'm tired of letting an ancient hatred dictate my life. I love you, Lucien Draegor, and I refuse to apologize for it." "I love you too," Lucien said, the words feeling like both a declaration and a vow. "Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Selene agreed, and kissed him again. They didn't know it then, but that kiss sealed their fate. The wheels of tragedy were already in motion, set spinning by eyes that had watched from the shadows, by loyalty that valued clan over individual happiness, by hatred that had roots too deep to easily dig up. But for that moment, in that forgotten cemetery under the watchful stars, they were simply two people in love, believing that love might be enough to overcome anything. For 6 blissful weeks, they managed to keep their relationship secret. They were careful, always varying their meeting times and locations, never staying in one place too long. They met in abandoned buildings, forgotten parks, once even in a closed museum after hours, surrounded by artifacts from civilizations long dead while they celebrated the life they had found in each other. But secrets, especially ones this dangerous, have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments. It was Selene's younger sister, Lyra, who discovered them first. She had grown suspicious of Selene's frequent absences and had followed her one night, concealing herself with the stealth that all vampires possessed. What she saw, her beloved sister in the arms of a Draegor, kissing him with obvious passion and affection, shattered her world. Lyra didn't confront them that night. Instead, she ran straight to their mother, Lady Vaelor, and told her everything. The confrontation came the following evening. Selene had barely entered the Vaelor estate when her mother appeared, her face carved from ice, fury radiating from her like heat from a furnace. "My study. Now," Vera commanded, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Selene's blood ran cold, but she held her head high as she followed her mother into the private study. The moment the door closed behind them, Vera whirled on her. "Tell me Lyra is lying," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Tell me she is mistaken, that she did not see you embracing Lucien Draegor like some common whore." Selene flinched at the venom in her mother's words, but refused to back down. "I won't lie to you, Mother. It's true. I love him." The slap came so fast Selene didn't have time to dodge. Her head snapped to the side, and she tasted blood, her own blood, for the first time in years. "You love him," Vera hissed. "You don't love him," You stupid child. You're infatuated. You're bored. You're foolish. But love requires wisdom, requires understanding the consequences of your actions. And what you've done has consequences you cannot begin to imagine. The only consequence is that two people have found happiness, Selene shot back, her own anger rising. We haven't hurt anyone. We haven't committed any crime except daring to cross an invisible line drawn centuries ago by people who are now dust. That line exists for a reason. Vera roared, her composure finally cracking. The Draegors are our enemies. They have killed our people, destroyed our holdings, sought to undermine everything we have built. Your great-grandfather was murdered by Victor Draegor himself, and you would spit on his memory by lying with his son. Selene had heard the stories, of course, but that was over 100 years ago, Mother. How many more generations must pay for the crimes of their ancestors? When does it end? It ends when they are destroyed, Vera said coldly. And it certainly doesn't end because my daughter decided to betray her entire clan for a pretty face and sweet words. I haven't betrayed anyone, Selene insisted. I've just refused to inherit a hatred that doesn't belong to me. Then you are no daughter of mine, Vera said, each word falling like a stone. You are forbidden from seeing him again. If you disobey me, I will have no choice but to take more drastic measures. Do you understand? I understand that you would rather see me miserable and alone than happy with someone from the wrong clan, Selene said bitterly. You will thank me someday, Vera replied. When you're older, when you've gained some wisdom, you'll understand that some prices are too high to pay, even for love. I doubt that very much, Selene whispered. She was confined to the estate after that, essentially a prisoner in her own home. Guards were posted at every exit, and Lyra was tasked with watching her constantly. They took her phone, cut off her access to the outside world, and made it clear that any attempt to escape would result in consequences for both her and Lucien. Meanwhile, the Draegors had their own discovery to contend with. Lucien had been careless, just once. He had returned home with a small silver bracelet, a gift from Selene, tucked in his pocket. His father's chief enforcer, Marcus, had noticed it while conducting a routine security check of Lucien's chambers. The bracelet bore the Vaelor crest in miniature, impossible to miss once spotted. The confrontation with Victor was even more brutal than Selene's had been with her mother. You've been consorting with a Vaelor, Victor said, his voice devoid of emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying. How long? Lucien saw no point in lying. 2 months. 2 months, Victor repeated slowly. For 2 months, you have been meeting with our enemy, sharing our secrets, compromising our security. All for what? A momentary pleasure. It's not like that, Lucien said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I love her, Father, and she loves me. This doesn't have to be about the clans or the war or. It is always about the clans. Victor's roar shook the windows. Everything we do, everything we are, is about the clans. Your personal feelings are irrelevant. You are a Draegor. You have responsibilities, obligations, a duty to your family and your people. And you have betrayed all of it for a Vaelor whore. Lucien's control snapped. He moved faster than thought, suddenly nose to nose with his father, his eyes blazing with fury. Don't you dare speak of her that way. For a moment, genuine surprise flickered across Victor's face. Then it hardened into something terrible. You would threaten your own father over her? You would choose her over your clan. I would choose love over hate, Lucien said. Every single time. Then you are a fool, Victor said coldly. And you have left me no choice. You are confined to the estate until I decide what to do with you. Guards will be posted at your door. You will have no contact with the outside world, and you will certainly have no further contact with Selene Vaelor. If you attempt to defy me, I will have her killed. Do you understand me, boy? I will end her existence, and you will have to live with the knowledge that your defiance cost her everything. The threat was not idle. Lucien knew his father well enough to know he meant every word. And so, trapped by love and fear in equal measure, he submitted to imprisonment. I understand, he said quietly, the words tasting like poison. Good, Victor said. Now get out of my sight. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of captivity, of desperate loneliness, of fear and anger and helpless frustration. Lucien spent his days staring out the window of his chambers, wondering if Selene was safe, if she missed him as desperately as he missed her, if she had given up hope. He hadn't. Couldn't. The thought of never seeing her again, never holding her, never hearing her laugh or seeing her smile, it was unbearable. He would find a way to reach her. Consequences be damned. The opportunity came from an unexpected source. His younger brother, Adrian. Adrian had always been the rebellious one, the one who questioned authority and pushed boundaries. He had watched his brother's transformation from dutiful heir to passionate lover with great interest. And while he didn't fully understand Lucien's feelings, Adrian had never been in love. He respected them. "I can get you out," Adrian said one night, slipping into Lucien's chambers after bribing the guard with blood wine. "There's a gathering in the East Wing. Most of the guards will be occupied. I can create a distraction." "Father will kill you if he finds out you helped me," Lucien warned. Adrian shrugged. "He's already disappointed in me for 1,000 other reasons." "What's one more?" "Why are you doing this?" Lucien asked. "Because you're my brother," Adrian said simply. "And because I think it's bullshit that you should have to choose between your family and your happiness. Someone needs to break this cycle of hatred, and if you and your Vaelor girl want to be the ones to do it, I'll help however I can." Lucien embraced his brother tightly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Adrian said with a grin. "You still have to make it out alive. And then you have to figure out what to do next, because there's no going back after this." Adrian was right. Once Lucien left, he would be declaring war on his own clan, making himself a target. But what choice did he have? To stay was to slowly die inside, to become the kind of cold, bitter creature his father was. To leave was to have a chance at something real, something worth fighting for. He left that night. Meanwhile, Selene was hatching her own desperate plan. Despite the guards and her sister's watchful eyes, she had managed to make contact with an old friend, a vampire named Theron who owed her a favor and cared nothing for clan politics. He had agreed to help her escape, but the price was high. She would be abandoning everything, becoming clanless, essentially in exile. "Are you sure about this?" Theron asked as he helped her climb down from her bedroom window in the dead of night. "There's no coming back from this, Selene. You'll be giving up your family, your position, everything." "I lost my family the moment they tried to keep me from the person I love," Selene said firmly. "I'm sure." She ran into the night, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and exhilaration. She had sent word to Lucien through Theron, telling him to meet her at the cemetery where they had first declared their love. She could only pray he had received the message, that he would be there, that they could figure out their next move together. When she arrived at the cemetery, she found it empty. Panic seized her chest. Had something happened to him? Had his father discovered their plan? Was she too late? Selene. She spun around to find Lucien standing behind her, and the relief that flooded through her was so intense it almost brought her to her knees. She ran to him, and he caught her in his arms, holding her as if he would never let go. "I thought you weren't coming," she gasped against his chest. "I will always come for you," he promised. "Always." They held each other for a long moment, just breathing, reassuring themselves that they were both real, both safe, both here. Then reality intruded, as it always does. "We can't stay here," Lucien said. "It won't take long for them to discover we're both missing, and when they do—" "They'll come looking," Selene finished. "So where do we go?" "We can't exactly hide in plain sight." "I have an idea," Lucien said. "It's risky, but it might be our only chance." Lucien's plan was audacious and potentially suicidal, which meant it was probably the only thing that might actually work. There was a place, he explained as they fled through the night, where clanless vampires gathered. A sanctuary of sorts, hidden deep in the mountains, run by an ancient vampire named Corvus who had rejected clan politics centuries ago. It was neutral territory in the truest sense. All were welcome, but clan warfare was absolutely forbidden within its borders. Those who violated the peace of sanctuary, as the place was simply called, were dealt with swiftly and permanently. "Corvus is a legend," Selene said as they traveled. "I've heard stories about him since I was newly turned. They say he's over 1,000 years old, that he fought in the first vampire wars, that he's seen the rise and fall of civilizations. Do you really think he'll help us?" "I think he's our only hope," Lucien replied. "And I think he might be sympathetic to our cause. After all, he left his own clan to establish sanctuary. He understands what it means to reject hatred in favor of something better." The journey took 3 nights. They traveled mostly by foot, avoiding major cities and populated areas where they might be recognized. They fed when necessary, always careful to choose victims who wouldn't be missed and to leave them alive, if dazed and confused. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, there were moments of almost perfect happiness. One night, they stopped by a river, and Selene taught Lucien a dance she had learned in her youth. They moved together under the stars, laughing when he stepped on her feet, spinning until they were dizzy. Another night, they broke into an abandoned cottage and spent hours simply talking, sharing every hope and fear and dream they had never dared voice before. "What do you want?" Selene asked him as dawn approached on the second night, forcing them to seek shelter. "If we manage to survive this, if we actually make it to Sanctuary and build a life there, what kind of life do you want?" Lucien considered the question carefully. "Peace," he said finally. "I want peace. I want to wake up each night without the weight of expectations crushing me. I want to read books and discuss philosophy and learn new things just because I find them interesting, not because they might be useful for clan politics. And I want you beside me through all of it." "That sounds perfect," Selene whispered, lacing her fingers through his. "What about you?" Lucien asked. "The same," Selene said. "But I also want to help others. I've been thinking about all those vampires trapped in clan feuds they never chose, living with hatred they never truly understood. Maybe at Sanctuary we could create something new. A place where vampires could come to remember that there's more to existence than endless conflict." "A vampire counselor?" Lucien teased gently. "Why not?" Selene challenged. "We have eternity. Why not spend it trying to make things better?" "No reason at all," Lucien agreed, kissing her forehead. "I think it's a beautiful idea." They reached the mountains on the third night, and as they climbed higher into the rocky terrain, they began to see signs that they were approaching something significant. Ancient runes carved into stone, wards and protections that made the air shimmer with power, and finally, a massive gate set into the mountainside itself, flanked by 2 vampires who watched their approach with alert, wary eyes. "State your business," one of the guards commanded, his hand resting on the hilt of a silver blade. "We seek audience with Corvus," Lucien said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We seek sanctuary." The guards exchanged glances. "Names and clans," the second guard demanded. This was the moment of truth. "Lucien Draegor and Selene Vaelor," Lucien said clearly. "And we are here because our clans would see us dead for the crime of loving each other." More glances between the guards, this time with raised eyebrows. "You're the heir to the Draegor clan," the first guard said. "I was," Lucien corrected. "Now I'm just someone seeking a safe place to exist with the person I love." The guards seemed to come to some silent agreement. "Wait here," one of them said, and disappeared through the gate. 15 tense minutes passed before the gate opened again, and the guard returned with another vampire, this one clearly ancient. He was tall and lean, with silver hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes that seemed to contain the weight of centuries. Power radiated from him like warmth from a fire, and both Lucien and Selene instinctively bowed their heads in respect. "I am Corvus," the ancient vampire said, his voice resonant and commanding. "And you are the Draegor heir and the Vaelor princess who have set both your clans ablaze with fury by daring to love each other. We have much to discuss." He turned and walked through the gate without waiting to see if they would follow. Lucien and Selene exchanged a glance, then hurried after him. The interior of Sanctuary was unlike anything they had expected. Rather than a cold, austere fortress, it was a sprawling underground city carved into the mountain itself. Warm light emanated from thousands of luminescent crystals embedded in the walls, casting everything in a soft, welcoming glow. Vampires moved through the streets with purpose and peace. No clan insignias visible, no hierarchies enforced by fear. It was, in every sense, a place where vampires came to simply be. Corvus led them to a chamber at the heart of the mountain. A circular room with walls covered in ancient texts and artifacts from civilizations long forgotten. He gestured for them to sit, then settled into his own chair with the fluid grace of extreme age. "Tell me your story," he commanded. "All of it. Leave nothing out." So they did. They told him about the Crimson Moon Festival, about their secret meetings, about falling in love despite every reason not to. They told him about being discovered, about their imprisonment, about their desperate escape. And they told him about their hope, fragile and perhaps foolish, but real nonetheless, that love might be stronger than hatred. Corvus listened without interruption, his ancient eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. When they finished, silence filled the chamber for a long moment. "You understand," Corvus said finally, "that by coming here, you have made yourselves targets. Your clans will not simply forget about you. They will see your defection as betrayal, your love as treason. They may even come for you, despite the protections of Sanctuary." "We understand," Lucien said firmly, reaching for Selene's hand. "But we would rather face danger together than safety apart." "And you believe love is worth this price?" Corvus asked, his gaze sharp and penetrating. "Worth exile, worth danger, worth potentially igniting a war that could consume innocents on both sides?" "Yes," Selene said without hesitation. "Because the alternative is to surrender to fear and hatred. And if we do that, then the clans have already won. They've already destroyed us, just in a different way." A slow smile spread across Corvus's ancient face. "Good answer." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I left my own clan 700 years ago because I grew tired of meaningless violence dressed up as honor. I founded Sanctuary because I believed there had to be a better way for our kind to exist. And in all those centuries, I have watched countless vampires arrive here, fleeing clan politics and ancient grudges. But you too. You are different." "How so?" Lucien asked. "Because you don't just want to escape," Corvus said. "You want to change things. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voices. You believe that your love might be the beginning of something larger, something that could heal old wounds. Am I wrong?" Lucien and Selene looked at each other, seeing their own hope reflected back. "No," Selene said. "You're not wrong. We don't just want to hide here and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. We want to prove that there's another way." "Then you will have my support," Corvus declared. "But understand this, Sanctuary offers protection, but it does not offer isolation. What happens here echoes in the world beyond. If you truly want to bridge the gap between your clans, you will need to do more than simply exist together peacefully. You will need to become a symbol, a living example of what's possible. And that will make you targets in ways you cannot yet imagine." "We're ready," Lucien said, though his voice held the tremor of someone who knows they might be lying. "We'll see," Corvus said with a knowing smile. "For now, rest. You are safe here. Tomorrow, we begin the real work." News of Lucien and Selene's arrival at Sanctuary spread through the vampire world like wildfire. Some viewed them as romantics, star-crossed lovers worthy of sympathy. Others saw them as traitors who had betrayed their sacred duty to clan and family. But everyone had an opinion, and those opinions quickly polarized the vampire community in ways that hadn't been seen in centuries. Within the Draegor clan, Victor's rage was legendary. He called for an emergency council, demanding that action be taken against his wayward son. "He has made fools of us all," Victor thundered to the assembled elders. "He has betrayed everything we stand for, and he must be made an example of. I propose we issue a blood decree. Lucien Draegor is to be hunted down and executed for treason against his clan." But not everyone agreed. One of the elders, a vampire named Helena who had known Lucien since his turning, spoke up. He is young and foolish, yes, but is death really the appropriate response? He fell in love. Is that truly a crime worthy of execution? He fell in love with a Vaelor. Victor roared. With the enemy. With the daughter of the clan that murdered my father. Your father died in combat over a century ago, Helena said calmly. And her father was killed by your hand in retaliation. At what point does the cycle end, Victor? How many more generations must bleed for crimes they did not commit? It ends when our enemies are destroyed, Victor said coldly. Not when my son decides to fuck one of them. The crude language shocked the council into silence. Victor was many things, but he was rarely crude. His loss of composure revealed just how deeply Lucien's betrayal had wounded him. I call for a vote, Victor demanded. All in favor of issuing a blood decree against Lucien Draegor? The vote was closer than Victor had hoped. 5 in favor, 4 against. But it was enough. The blood decree was issued, and with it, every vampire who owed allegiance to the Draegor clan was now honor-bound to kill Lucien on sight. The Vaelor clan's response was, if anything, even more severe. Lady Vera called for Selene's name to be stricken from all family records, as if she had never existed. She is dead to us, Vera pronounced, her voice like ice. Dead and gone. No Vaelor will speak her name, acknowledge her existence, or offer her aid. She has made her choice, and she will live and die with the consequences. But Lyra, the sister who had first discovered their relationship, found herself unexpectedly conflicted. She had been so certain that exposing Selene was the right thing to do, the loyal thing to do. But as she watched her mother's cold fury, as she saw her sister's name literally being scratched from the family tree, she began to question everything. Late one night, unable to sleep despite the sun being hours away, Lyra found herself in Selene's abandoned chambers. The room had already been stripped of most personal effects, but a few items remained: a book of poetry, a sketchpad filled with drawings, a small music box that played a haunting melody when opened. Lyra picked up the music box and sat on the bed, letting the music wash over her. She remembered when Selene had received this gift, remembered her joy, her laughter. When had her sister, her brilliant, kind, passionate sister, become the enemy? When had love become a crime? I'm sorry, Lyra whispered to the empty room, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Selene. Back at Sanctuary, Lucien and Selene were learning what it truly meant to be clanless. Corvus had assigned them mentors, other vampires who had made the difficult transition from clan life to independent existence. They learned new skills: how to hunt without clan support, how to navigate vampire society without the protection of a family name, how to defend themselves against those who might see them as easy targets. But more importantly, they were learning about themselves and each other in ways that their secret meetings had never allowed. Living together, facing challenges together, they discovered both their strengths and their weaknesses. Lucien, they learned, was a natural leader despite his reluctance to assume that role. Other vampires in Sanctuary gravitated toward him, seeking his counsel and advice. He had a gift for seeing multiple perspectives, for finding common ground where others saw only conflict. Selene discovered a passion for teaching. She began working with newly turned vampires who arrived at Sanctuary confused and frightened, helping them adapt to their new existence with patience and compassion. She also started organizing discussion groups, bringing together vampires from different clans to talk about their experiences and find common humanity, or whatever the vampire equivalent might be. 3 months into their exile, Corvus called them to his chambers again. "You've adapted well," he said without preamble. "Better than I expected, honestly. But remaining here, safe and protected, was never the point, was it?" "No," Lucien agreed. "We came here to survive, but we want to do more than just survive." "Good," Corvus said, "because I have a proposition for you. In 2 weeks, there will be a gathering of clan representatives at Shadowmere, the same place where you first met. It's a regular council meeting, held quarterly to discuss matters of mutual interest and maintain the fragile peace that keeps our kind from open warfare. I have been invited, as I always am, and I am permitted to bring guests. I would like you both to come with me." Selene's eyes widened. You want us to walk into a room full of clan leaders, including our own parents who have declared us traitors? Yes, Corvus said simply. I want you to stand before them and speak your truth. I want you to tell them what you told me, that love is stronger than hatred, that old grudges need not be eternal, that there is another way forward. They'll never listen, Lucien said, though his voice held more hope than certainty. Perhaps not, Corvus agreed. But then again, perhaps some will. And if even a few open their minds to the possibility of change, that's a start. Besides, you said you wanted to be more than just another couple hiding from the world. Here's your chance to actually make a difference. It's dangerous, Selene said. Extremely, Corvus confirmed. There are those who would kill you on sight, blood decree or no blood decree. But I will guarantee your safety while you are under my protection. Within the walls of Shadowmere, you will be untouchable. What happens after you leave, however, is our problem, Lucien finished. He looked at Selene, a question in his eyes. She took a deep breath, then nodded. We do it. Together. Together, Lucien agreed. Then prepare yourselves, Corvus said. What happens in 2 weeks will determine not just your fate, but potentially the fate of all our kind. No pressure. His attempt at levity did nothing to ease the knot of fear and anticipation in their chests. But they had made their choice, and they would see it through. The 2 weeks before the council meeting passed in a blur of preparation. Corvus worked with them on their presentation, helping them craft their message in a way that might penetrate the armor of centuries-old prejudice. They practiced their speeches until they could deliver them in their sleep, anticipated every possible objection and prepared responses, and tried very hard not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The night before they were to leave for Shadowmere, Lucien found Selene standing on one of Sanctuary's balconies, staring out at the moonlit mountains. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. What if we make things worse? What if instead of building a bridge between our clans, we just give them a common enemy to unite against? Then at least we tried, Lucien said. And if we fail together. That's all we can ask for. Is it enough? Selene wondered. Is love really enough to change the world? Lucien turned her around to face him, cupping her face in his hands. Love didn't change the world, he said softly. Love gave us the courage to try. The rest is up to us. She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate love into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Whatever happens tomorrow, Selene said, I want you to know that these past few months with you have been the happiest of my entire existence. No matter what comes next, I'll never regret choosing you. Neither will I, Lucien promised. The journey to Shadowmere was tense. They traveled with Corvus and a small escort of sanctuary guards, vampires who had pledged to protect them but whose presence was really more symbolic than practical. If multiple clans decided to attack, even the most skilled guards couldn't save them. As they approached the grand estate where the council would be held, Lucien felt the weight of history pressing down on him. This was where it had all started, where he had first seen Selene across a crowded ballroom and felt his world shift on its axis. Now they were returning, not as heirs to rival clans, but as something new, something that defied categorization. The Great Hall was already filled with representatives from every major clan when they arrived. Conversations died as they entered, hundreds of eyes turning to stare at the infamous couple. Lucien spotted his father immediately. Victor stood with the other Draegor elders, his face carved from stone, revealing nothing. Across the room, Lady Vera stood with equal composure, though her eyes burned with cold fury when they landed on Selene. Corvus led them to seats at the front of the hall, in the neutral zone reserved for clanless vampires. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. The council began with the usual formalities, reports on territory disputes, discussions of human awareness and how to maintain secrecy, debates about resource allocation. Lucien barely heard any of it. His focus entirely on the moment when Corvus would introduce them and their world would either expand or collapse entirely. Finally, after 2 hours of mundane business, Corvus rose to speak. Honored representatives, he began, his ancient voice carrying easily through the hall. "I come before you today not to discuss territory or politics, but to speak," continued. "Lucien Draegor and Selene Vaelor, star-crossed lovers from enemy clans, now exiled from their families for the crime of falling in love. Some of you have called them traitors. Others have called them fools. But I call them something else. I call them hope. This is an outrage." Victor's voice rang out. "This council is not the place for romantic declarations. These two have betrayed their clans, violated sacred oaths, and reminded us that we are more than our clans," Corvus interrupted calmly. "More than our grudges, more than our ancient hatreds. They have reminded us that love, compassion, and connection are still possible, even for those of us who have walked this earth for centuries." He gestured for Lucien and Selene to stand. On shaking legs, they rose. "I will let them speak for themselves," Corvus said. "And I ask you all to listen with open minds and hearts. Remember that we were all human once, capable of love and hope and change. We need not have lost those qualities simply because we no longer age." Lucien stepped forward first, his heart pounding despite having no need to beat. He looked out at the assembled vampires, some curious, some hostile, some carefully neutral, and began to speak. "Honored elders, clan representatives, fellow vampires," he said, working to keep his voice steady. "I stand before you today not to make excuses for my actions, but to ask you a simple question. Why?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air. "Why do the Draegors and Vaelors hate each other? I've asked this question many times, and I've yet to receive a satisfactory answer. I'm told it's because of ancient insults, old wounds, long-dead grievances. But when I press for details, the answers become vague. It's tradition, I'm told. It's the way things have always been. It's a matter of honor." He looked directly at his father. "But whose honor? The honor of vampires who died centuries ago and cared nothing for the lives of those who would come after them? We've been fighting so long that most of us can't even remember why we started." Selene stepped forward to join him, her voice clear and strong. "I grew up hearing that the Draegors were monsters, that they were our sworn enemies, that to even speak with one was to betray everything my clan stood for. But when I actually met Lucien, when I talked with him and got to know him, I discovered something shocking. He was just a person with hopes and fears, dreams and doubts, just like me." She scanned the crowd, making eye contact with as many vampires as she could. "How many of you have actually spoken with your supposed enemies? How many have looked past the clan names and propaganda to see the individuals behind them? Or have we all just accepted the hatred handed down to us without question, without thought, without consideration for whether it still serves any purpose? It serves the purpose of protecting our people." This came from Lady Vera, who had risen to her feet, trembling with rage. "The Draegors have killed our kind. They have stolen from us, attacked us, sought to destroy everything we've built. And you would have us simply forget that because you've fallen for one of them? I would have you ask whether continuing to kill each other for crimes committed by our ancestors serves anyone except our own egos," Selene shot back. "Mother, you taught me that strength comes from protecting our people. But what are we protecting them from? A war that exists only because neither side is willing to be the first to lay down arms." "You speak of things you don't understand," Victor interjected, his voice cold. "You are both young, naive, foolish. You think love conquers all, that the world will reshape itself to accommodate your feelings. But hatred exists for a reason. It keeps us sharp, keeps us vigilant, keeps us from being destroyed by those who would take advantage of weakness. Is that what you call love?" Lucien asked his father. "Weakness? I've fought beside you, father. I've seen you show no mercy to enemies, no compassion to those who crossed you. I used to think that was strength. But now I realize it's just fear dressed up as power. You're afraid that if you stop hating, you'll have to confront the emptiness that hatred has left inside you." The hall erupted into chaos. Some vampires shouted their agreement with Lucien and Selene, others called for their immediate execution. Fights nearly broke out between different factions. Corvus had to exert his considerable authority to restore order. When the noise finally died down, an unexpected voice spoke up. Helena, the Draegor elder who had voted against the blood decree, rose to her feet. "I have a question for both of you," she said. "What do you hope to accomplish here? Even if some of us are moved by your words, even if we begin to question the old hatreds, the feuds between our clans won't end overnight. So what is your actual goal?" Lucien and Selene looked at each other, then back at Helena. "We want to start a dialogue," Selene said. "We want to create a space where vampires from different clans can come together, talk, and begin to see each other as individuals rather than enemies. We're not naive enough to think centuries of conflict will disappear because of one speech. But we believe that change has to start somewhere, and we're willing to be that starting point." "We're proposing a trial," Lucien added. 6 months where representatives from the Draegor and Vaelor clans agree to meet regularly, under Corvus's mediation, to discuss our grievances and search for common ground. If after 6 months nothing has changed, then you can go back to hating each other with clear consciences. But if there's even a chance for peace, isn't it worth exploring? The hall fell silent as vampires considered this proposal. Victor looked like he wanted to refuse immediately, but Helena was nodding thoughtfully. "I would support such a trial," she said. "Not because I trust the Vaelors, but because I'm tired of watching our people die for a war that serves no one but our own pride." To everyone's surprise, another voice joined hers. Lyra Vaelor, Selene's younger sister, who had been sitting with the Vaelor delegation. "I would also support it," Lyra said, her voice shaking but determined. "My sister made me see that our hatred has costs beyond what we acknowledge. If there's a chance to end this cycle, we owe it to ourselves to try." More voices joined in, some in support, others in opposition. The debate raged for hours, with Corvus carefully moderating and ensuring all perspectives were heard. Finally, as dawn approached and the vampires needed to seek shelter, a vote was called. The proposal passed by the narrowest of margins. 1 vote. One single vote determined that the trial would proceed, that Draegors and Vaelors would attempt to talk rather than fight. As the council dispersed and vampires hurried to find shelter from the coming sun, Lucien and Selene stood together, exhausted and exhilarated and terrified of what they had just set in motion. Corvus approached them, a slight smile on his ancient face. "Well done," he said. "You've just accomplished something I thought impossible. You've gotten the Draegors and Vaelors to agree to talk. That's no small feat." "Will it be enough?" Selene asked. "I don't know," Corvus admitted, "but it's a start. And sometimes, that's all we can ask for." The 6 months that followed were the most challenging of Lucien and Selene's lives. The meetings between Draegor and Vaelor representatives were contentious, often degenerating into shouting matches. Old wounds were reopened, accusations flung, and more than once, violence was only barely averted by Corvus's intervention. But slowly, painfully, progress was made. It started small. During the 3rd meeting, a young Draegor vampire named Marcus mentioned that his sister had been killed in a raid 20 years ago. A Vaelor representative, Elena, quietly admitted that her brother had died in that same raid. For a moment, they looked at each other not as enemies but as two people who had experienced the same loss, the same grief. They talked after the meeting ended, just the two of them, about their siblings and their pain. It didn't heal anything, but it created a crack in the wall of hatred, a tiny space where empathy could seep through. More such moments followed. Vampires discovered shared interests. A Draegor artist and a Vaelor musician found common ground in their love of human culture. A Draegor scholar and a Vaelor historian realized they had been researching the same historical event from different perspectives and began collaborating on a comprehensive account. It wasn't smooth or easy. There were setbacks. A Draegor vampire attacked a Vaelor in a bar fight, citing the old hatred as justification. A Vaelor raiding party struck at a Draegor holding, nearly collapsing the entire peace process. Each time, Lucien and Selene had to intervene, mediating, pleading, sometimes threatening, doing whatever it took to keep the fragile peace from shattering completely. The strain took its toll on their relationship. They argued more, both exhausted and stressed by the weight of expectation placed upon them. One night, after a particularly brutal meeting, they had their worst fight yet. "Maybe we should just give up," Selene said, pacing their chambers at sanctuary like a caged animal. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe some hatreds are too deep to heal. You don't mean that, Lucien said, though he sounded uncertain. Don't I? Selene spun to face him. We've spent 6 months watching our people hurt each other while pretending to make peace. Nothing has really changed, Lucien. The hatred is still there, just beneath the surface. We haven't accomplished anything except giving everyone false hope. We've accomplished more than you think, Lucien argued. Those small connections, those moments of understanding, they matter. They're seeds that might grow into something bigger. Or they might wither and die the moment the trial period ends and everyone goes back to hating each other. Selene's voice cracked. I miss my sister. I miss my home. And for what? For a peace that might not even be real. Lucien crossed to her and pulled her into his arms, holding her as she finally broke down, tears streaming down her face for the first time in months. I miss my brother too, he whispered. I miss aspects of my old life. But Selene, I don't regret any of it. Even if this fails, even if we end up right back where we started, I will never regret choosing you. Never. How can you be so sure? She asked, her voice muffled against his chest. Because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Lucien said simply. Everything else is just details. That fight, paradoxically, strengthened their relationship. They had aired their doubts, their fears, their frustrations, and had come through it still together, still united. After that night, they made a pact. No matter how hard things got, they would be honest with each other about their struggles. No more pretending to be stronger than they were. As the 6-month trial period neared its end, Corvus called another council meeting to assess the progress. The atmosphere was tense as vampires from both clans gathered at Shadowmere once again. The trial period is complete, Corvus announced. It is time to determine whether this experiment in peace will continue, or whether the Draegors and Vaelors will return to their old hostilities. Each clan will vote, continue the peace process, or end it. Victor stood first, his face as cold and impassive as ever. The Draegor clan recognizes that some limited progress has been made, he said stiffly, clearly hating every word. However, we remain skeptical that true peace is possible. Nevertheless, we are willing to continue the dialogue for another 6 months, on a trial basis. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was something. Lucien felt a flicker of hope. Lady Vera stood next, and for a long moment, she said nothing, simply staring at her daughter across the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold but not cruel. The Vaelor clan has also seen some value in this process, she said. We do not trust the Draegors, and perhaps we never will. But we acknowledge that continued warfare serves neither clan well. We agree to continue the talks. The room erupted in conversation, some vampires cheering, others protesting. But the decision had been made. The peace would continue. After the meeting, as vampires dispersed into the night, Lyra approached Selene hesitantly. Sister, she said, the word sounding strange after months of imposed silence. Lyra, Selene replied, her heart racing. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, years of closeness warring with months of estrangement. I'm sorry, Lyra finally said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry for what I did. I thought I was protecting you, protecting our family, but all I did was cause pain. Can you ever forgive me? Selene pulled her sister into a fierce embrace. There's nothing to forgive, she whispered. You did what you thought was right. I understand that now. Mother misses you, Lyra said quietly. She won't admit it, but I see it in her eyes. She looks at your empty chair at dinner and her face just crumbles. Maybe someday, Selene said, but not yet. There's still too much hurt, too much that needs to heal. I understand, Lyra said, but know that when you're ready, I'll be here. And I'll help bridge that gap however I can. Similar reconciliations were happening across the room. Adrian, Lucien's brother, had sought him out and they spoke for the first time in months, rebuilding their bond. Other vampires who had been friends before clan loyalty tore them apart were tentatively reaching out, testing whether old connections could be restored. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect, but it was something.